All right, good afternoon. It's October 18. This is the C4 Toll Strategy Subcommittee meeting. We have one of our co-chairs here, that's Commissioner Adam Morrow from Oregon City. And so we'll look to you, Commissioner, to take it away.
All right, I will call this meeting of the C4 Toll Strategy Subcommittee to order. Our first order of business is another update on the Special Legislative Subcommittee on Transportation Planning. And when I say another, for those of us who are at C4, we heard a little bit about this, but I will turn it over to Trent to talk a little bit more about what did and more importantly did not happen at this special meeting during legislative days. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you for that. And Brian, if you would please, I'm getting a text from Commissioner Savas about the Zoom link. So let me make you the co-host, please. Can you please help email him the link to this meeting?
Sure thing. Yeah, I'll get it to him.
Thank you. All right, so that gives me some space to answer your questions here. Oh, actually, he's in now. Perfect. Let me just check for everybody else here. Good. So yes, the Special Subcommittee on Transportation Planning. This was the subcommittee that was long in the making. I gave a little bit of an update to the big C4 table in early October because the meeting happened just shortly before that. And I would say there's not really a bigger update beyond that, except for a couple of things that we're hearing sort of whispers of. And so it's all in the tunnels, as it were. And so y'all know this. It's a subcommittee that was created as a result of the pause. The governor issued the pause on the collection of tolls. The legislature put together this subcommittee, and these are my words, to look under the hood of the toll program as it relates to what the legislature sort of directed for the creation of the toll program. And at that meeting, which took a long time to get to, I think there was a lot of questions by this group over many months. When will this group meet? What will they talk about? What is their agenda? And that became fairly evident early on in that meeting. It was a meeting of presentations that happened during the legislative days. And it was, I think, I'll let y'all do the reactions to it as the elected officials, but I'll say at the staff level, the big outcome was that they lined out verbally, but not on paper, but they verbally lined out what their goal is for this group, which is to have 10 meetings between, let's just say now and the end of the February short session here in 2024, 10 meetings that cover a set of topics, 3 of which of those meetings would be the earlier side of those 10 meetings would happen up here in the region. And they verbally outlaid some geographies where that could happen. Hi, Commissioner Savas. Sorry for any Zoom link challenges, but I'm glad you made it. So they lined out that 10 meeting strategy or 10 meeting goal. 3 of those meetings will be up here in the region. It sounds like 2 of them potentially could be in the Clackamas, within Clackamas County. One of them was, again, geographies were a little weird. I believe it was Lake Oswego, Charbonneau, Tualatin. So it's like South Wilsonville up to Lake Oswego. So that's the I-5 South corridor. One of the geographies was Westland, Oregon City, Gladstone, East Portland. That's, like I don't know what that means yet. We don't know what that means yet. But we'll see what it means. And the other one was Portland, kind of in general. And so the way I'm trying to interpret that is that's where 3 of the big bottleneck projects are, and that's where they're trying to focus their meeting. So looking for like that positive interpretation until I see otherwise, that it will be in and around those communities most affected by the bottlenecks and congestion and traffic. So that is also what this group and C4 at large and many of your communities have been asking for, is that opportunity to go testify in front of legislators and have that moment to speak and be heard to folks who might be in a decision role. Now, I say that in that way about the decision role because the co-chairs of the Joint Transportation Committee had the initial comments at that subcommittee. And they were very clear that this is not a decision body, it's a recommendation body. And they will make a recommendation up to the Joint Committee on Transportation. And that may feel a little janky or hard to hear, but that's also how C4 functions. That's how a lot of subcommittees function. And so it does probably could have guessed at that to a degree. And so I would just encourage y'all, Toll Strategy Subcommittee, that's in your title, right? To be thinking about what is the strategy for encouraging or testifying or influencing your needs into, or instilling your needs into the testimonies that will be coming up for this legislative subcommittee. And how will you, what kind of questions do you want to ask them to influence what their long-term recommendation might actually be? So just kind of keep those things in mind. What we've heard is that there will be no meetings here in October. That's great because it's really basically the end of October, even though it's the middle of October. But gosh, it already feels like November to me in many ways. I've heard that there's probably not going to be any meetings in December, which with the holidays, that makes a lot of sense. But there's also holidays all over November, so I don't know what that's going to mean. Probably what it really means is that January and February and March will be really busy with these meetings, if that's really where they ramp up. Until we see an actual document that outlines when these meetings are going to happen, that's the best information that I have. Nothing is published yet on when this group will meet. There's no agenda that's out there, even for our own 2 legislators who were on that subcommittee. So that's Representative Anessa Hartman and Rep. Lewis, who's kind of that Southern Clackamas area down there. Specifically, Malala is his population, and then a lot of trees within Clackamas County. Most of our trees, actually, in Clackamas County. Still does a great job. And both of them are really talented legislators within the Clackamas County cohort. So great to have them. And I would just say that Representative Hartman, representing the area within the toll corridor, has a lot of really good energy around this work. And so I think it behooves you, and I would encourage y'all to use some of this time right now after I'm done talking you're welcome to react to what you heard in that meeting if it's different, because there certainly were things to react to. Again, I'll let the political reactions live in your comments. But I would encourage you to spend a couple minutes talking about how you want to show up at these meetings and topics that you really want to level up when it gets there, because I think that that's going to be helpful to Representative Hartman to go and to say to the committee, hey, when we went out to visit, I heard these things. And I really feel like it's incumbent upon us to look under the hood, that's my phrase, but to look under the hood and get to the end of our recommendation timeline to say, this is or isn't going to work. We should or shouldn't move forward, with this, if that's where she wants to go. And I think that is where she wants to go. She wants to know, is this going to work? Are these concerns legitimate? Can they be addressed by ODOT? I think that's what the subcommittee could ask with her direction and influence, if that's what you are recommending at these testimonies. And can they get legitimate answers from ODOT to get to the end of their timeline to say, yeah, it does or doesn't make sense for this to continue as proposed. Right? That would be, in Trent's opinion, an ideal outcome of this subcommittee, that by the end of it, y'all have been able to speak. They have been able to deliberate that your concerns or comments have gotten their day in the sun, and ODOT has been able to address them or not. And I guess in Trent's opinion, as your staffer, if they are able to adequately answer your questions, that is really valuable and something that we've really struggled with. And so if they can do that by the end of February, great. But they've also really struggled to do it. So I'll just say my doubts are high, but the opportunity is there. How's that? They have a big job. I don't want to downplay it. There's a couple of ODOT people in the room. So you're doing a heavy lift work over there, and it's been challenging. I think we can all just name that and say it here frankly. So I give it back to you. That's the update, which is basically there's no new news since our last update at the big C4 table.
Thank you, Trent. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, appreciate the overview, Trent, of what we know as of this point. For those of you that watched that meeting, that 2-something-hour meeting, you would glean out of that very easily that many of the people on the subcommittee don't understand the lay of the land or our challenges. So I don't think it's a matter of them telling us, telling us what they think. I think it's a matter of us trying to educate them. And I think that was what I saw as the purpose or my goal last year to attend a joint transportation subcommittee hearing in Salem, and that never happened. So now we are pushed even farther away, in a sense. You could argue that now with a subcommittee, we're now even at a double arm's length away from the actual decision makers, because it was very clear that Chair McLean said that, basically she, affirmed that they are the decision makers, or she's a decision maker. and the subcommittee is supposed to make a recommendation, Trent, just as you said, make a recommendation. So I'm just concerned about the distance from them and the fact that very clear, they don't understand our geography. They don't understand the lay of the land. I think we need to think about not necessarily what we say at the hearing, but I think what we say and what we write, or what we put as a document to them. So be prepared for both, have both. I'm just concerned that the hearings may not be as generous in time, and words sometimes get lost. But I think if we did both, had some talking points and also had a summary or an outline in writing of everything we want to say or convey, I think that would go a lot farther, just to have that mindset. And lastly, on this one, I think we should do invites to those that are interested to do a tour of the area, so they can maybe get, in front of this, so to speak. I was very struck. I mean, it makes a lot of sense when you have some of these out of area state legislators are on this subcommittee. Representative Nathanson, for example, clearly does not understand the lay of our land. So that's all I have to say on that point.
Thank you, Commissioner Savis. I would concur. I think that that's one of the big assets of our joint tolling value statement is that we do have a lot of our thoughts coordinated there, and that will be a very good tool for us to use when we're trying to coordinate our messaging going there. And to your point about a tour, I think maybe it might be a good idea to have these insist that these listening sessions are held at a 5 p.m. either at Westland High School or somewhere along Main Street in Oregon City, so they can see what the diversion looks like already. So maybe that's something we can do. But Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, I was on the same page where I don't think this group is necessarily educated. And what really struck me is we had Rep. McLean was at a chamber event in our town, and Mayor, I'm going to call you Mayor Rory because I can't say your last name. That's what we call you in Tualatin. Anyway, he talked about diversion, and Rep. McLean gave this anecdotal story about growing up in Canby and what's 4 or 5 cars on the side roads, and it just showed me how out of touch these people might be. So the education piece is really important coming from us of what this diversion really means. And I don't know if there's any information we can provide with specifics of like how many people are going down Willamette Falls Drive between 3 and 7 every day, because I think it's a little more than they might expect.
Councillor Sherman.
Very good, thank you. Commissioner Marl, I do agree with you that the idea of coordinating events during rush hour is actually a very, very good idea. It's the equivalent of at MPAC, as we talk about using public transportation. And I invite anyone to come meet me in Happy Valley at 3 p.m. using public transportation, and just to give them a taste, because it's easy to talk about it. Theoretically, it's different when you actually have to do it. And so I guess the thought I would have just about some type of testimony, if I remember correctly, the composition of, or the tentative composition of the meetings that they talked about had some really less than useful topics, in my humble opinion, like gantry placement locations and things like that, that kind of felt like we were talking about, okay, this whole thing is already baked in the cake, so let's make some maneuvers like we're going around and talking about some of these pieces, but it really didn't. So my point being, as we come in early on to provide testimony, I think it will be very easy, because there are a whole bunch of flaws in this process, to become confusing with a lot of different things. And I feel like if we're able to fine-tune our arguments to the 1, 2, 3 really key question marks, whether it's about diversion or about public transportation availability in areas that aren't getting resources, or whatever those things are, and we can kind of continue to hit on those, and even potentially provide theoretical solutions, that too I think will go a long way. If we just come in and say, here are all the problems, it's just flawed. If we can also say, but one of the things we've explored is VMT is an alternative to tolling, and here's why it may or may, or as a complement to it, here's why they may or may not make sense. I think that could be helpful. So that's all I've got for you today. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that they brought up the 3 topics that they want to sort of cover during this timeline, and diversion wasn't listed in that conversation at all. It was a congestion, which we all are concerned about. It was toll gantries, and it was the toll price, which they then determined has nothing to do with that subcommittee. That's something that the OTC will get to discuss and make a decision on. So it felt like that topic at least was definitely probably out of their control, at least the way that the current statute is set up for the OTC. Although I would note that one of the representatives thought that said some things on the edge that made it sound like he would be interested in exploring if that's appropriate or not. And so that was Representative Maddox, who thought maybe the legislature should have a little bit more involvement in that. And something that we've talked about at the staff level at Clackamas County is in other states, toll programs have toll authorities, different elected officials that are elected to sort of govern a different tax, if you want to call it that. I think we all do. The toll gantry thing is certainly a strange one. I don't want to downplay it though. At the staff level, we've talked a lot about toll gantries, especially for the 205 project, remembering that it's separate from the RMPP, because where the 205 project gantries were initially conceived, where they landed, especially going southbound, changed how diversion would have looked within Oregon City if you got off on 213 or if you got off on 99, and what that would do to, the 213 and the jug handle there. So I don't think that it's not an issue, but it's a very technical one that's probably baked into the design. And so, yes, y'all at the political level, I think, can bring a different element to this and what y'all talked about so far. Diversion, which Representative Hartman said that's missing. She was very clear in that meeting that needs to level up. And so that was a great call out by her. I think safety is one that y'all talked about a lot as well. That's a major issue. And then, yeah, if the intent of the RMPP program, remembering that they're 2 separate projects, if the intent of the RMPP is to put people on different modes, those don't exist. And I think it would be easy for y'all to wave the map that was shared this morning, the high capacity transit map that shows the gap on the southern part where 205 is. That would be an easy place for you to suggest Exhibit A. We're 10 plus years out from having something to serve this area that's probably going to be tolled first to be able to meet the need of finding an alternative mode. I think there's room for y'all to have questions about that and whether it's fair, whether it's effective, whether it's going to be useful.
Thank you, Trent. I was just going to re-up that conversation about the tolling gantry locations, because at least for those of us on the adjoining communities to the I-205 tolling location, I will say that the new proposed location to be just on the bridge makes us a lot more nervous than the original proposal. And now that they've eliminated the proposal to put it on the Tualatin River Bridge, I believe, but anyway, Mayor Bialystowski.
Thank you. Yeah, we're still concerned about the tolling based on the locations based on the maps that we've seen with different scenarios that we have no information about diversion impacts. If you toll the interchange versus in between Stafford Road and exit 6 from Westland, that's a huge difference for Tualatin, for Westland. We have no data on that. But I was just going to bring up, I did notice one thing at the subcommittee was what I would call a misstatement, where they say, oh, local communities have agreed on the diversion model. And I've talked to staff and from county and Commissioner Savas and others, and I can't figure out when we ever agreed on the model, and we were also upset about the impacts and the lack of mitigation. So that's one thing to keep pointing out and maybe look into a little bit. I'd like to know what the basis is for that claim and how it's being repeated all the time and in different settings by ODOT. So that's one thing. And the other thing is just looking at the subcommittee, seeing what they're saying. It seems like they're trying to avoid the conversation that I thought was going to be happening at the subcommittee, and that I think some people who set up the subcommittee thought might happen, which is the look at alternative funding mechanisms and taking a real deep dive at that, and what's going to work, what's not going to, what doesn't work, are there alternatives to tolling, how do we make up for the shortfall? And that's really not what's being proposed to be discussed. So how do we, as the leaders of the cities and counties, bring that up? And Metro too, bring up, hey, we also want to talk about this. I know you don't want to talk about it right now, not been proposed, but how do we get that added to the conversation? Those are my two points.
Thanks for that. And I want to jump in to maybe help provide some options for that last comment that you made, Mayor, about the alternative funding mechanisms. I guess my first thought is, there's a lot of different forums where that conversation is happening. There's the AOC LOC forum. So through your city perspective, you can join that group. Commissioner Savas is on it from the AOC side, and they're having conversations about alternative funding mechanisms, because the problem is true for everybody, right? It's true for ODOT. The gas tax is going away. They need to solve the funding problem. And that's true for us in very much the same way. So all that's fair and true to talk about. I agree with you that the funding model was, Metro's talking about that at JPAC as well. So I don't want to downplay that. I think that will be a conversation they start to address here in the coming days. And then y'all can certainly talk about it here, and we can start creating space on this at this table or this forum to have more discussions around what some of the alternative methods y'all would like to see considered or pursue. And I'll challenge you a little bit that's going to go both ways. There's the big state elements that need to be pursued, and then what is in your local control to be able to address some of those pieces. And so that's going to be one of those situations where the phone rings both ways. It's not going to be something that just the state can solve. It's something that y'all might have to be thinking about for some local decision processes as well. So I want to put that out there, that we could put some C4 time to work on that. But because of how they introduced this subcommittee of just being these 10 meetings about tolling, getting to the end of February and getting to a recommendation point about tolling, I would encourage you. I guess, first of all, my reaction to that was, oh, that's too bad that they're not going to meet after those 10 meetings, because there's a lot of time between February, March, and 2025 when the transportation package is going to be an issue or a topic, where there will be some proposals on that transportation funding stuff. So I think that within your testimony, it would be very fair to request that proposed meeting timeline is too short, and that if they want to focus on these 10 meetings for just tolling, that's great. But there's so much work that can happen between March and otherwise, where this subcommittee is in a strategic spot to have if they're not going to recommend that they move forward tolling, to spend some time recommending the next thing or a diversity of things. And so I hope that this subcommittee gets to a point to say, look, this is a lot of work. We couldn't do it in 10 meetings, because I think that's probably true. We can't do it in 10 meetings. We do it every time, right? So I think that they'll probably feel the same way, I'm hoping, and see that they need to extend their meeting threshold and prioritize that those other discussions that bring more patches to the quilt of this funding conversation.
Yeah, so one thing that we really do need to be coordinated about is making sure we communicate the fact that we do want to be a part of the solution to the financing. I think there's a big misconception among many legislators that those of us in Clackamas County are just pushing back because we don't want to do it and we don't want to do anything, period. And we need to be serious about being at the table. We need to move on here quickly, but I'll go with the 3 hands that we have here. Commissioner Savas, go ahead.
I just want to remind everyone and draw your attention to a timing issue that I kind of see. And once you look at that, we might want to be maybe a little bit better, a little bit more strategic than we currently are right now. My concern is we put too much emphasis on this subcommittee and doing anything anytime soon, right? It was kind of stated, along the way, that this is all in prep for the long session of 2025. Next year it's 2024. There's a short session. So the timing I want you to remind you is that at this last C4 meeting we had about a week or so ago, you heard the gal from ODOT share with us, hey, we have this funding crisis. We did our April analysis and so forth, but they didn't really tell us what they're telling us now. So, then we have, the legislative session. We're blocked out of the hearings in the legislative session. There ain't going to be no hearings. And then no sooner did they gavel down the session with sine die, and then the RTAC meeting, they roll out the fact that they're gonna cancel our project, kind of tease that out, and then 2 days later, it's the OTC meeting where they're recommending to the governor this whole thing. So if you look at and then you factor in the pause. So when you look at the pause and how everything rolled out, folks, I'm just concerned that this subcommittee is going to go on and on and on, well past sine die of 2024. And if we put too much emphasis on this and not a strategy for the 2024 session, I think we're going to miss a boat here. And the boat I see, number one opportunity to share with the committee, not the subcommittee, but more so the urgency on funding 205 with a short term or intermediate term of gas tax increase or vehicle reg or some means to get the 205 project moving. I don't want to pass that up. I think we need to do all the above, in my opinion. I just don't have a lot of faith, frankly, that we're going to get much value in 2024 out of this subcommittee.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas. Mayor Milch.
Well, I agree with Trent about just the time of the hearings for this subcommittee not being very long, and also the timing is not very good. If the meetings are mostly in the winter, if we could get them to agree to some kind of ongoing community engagement process, not necessarily legislative hearings, but just some means by which people could come and testify, and it went into the spring and summer months so that more people would be able to go to evening meetings if they were scheduled then. That might be helpful too. I also agree about the issue of, we really have two separate issues here. What is our funding method for transportation in the state? And how do we, decrease congestion? And they've come up with one solution that attempts to do both. And so I think it's important to look at, I agree with others who've said, look at alternative funding methods besides tolling. Because when you talk about gantries and you talk about level of tolling, it sounds like tolling is your foregone conclusion, and you're really not open to looking at the broader issue of funding in general. And the League of Oregon Cities had a conference this past week, and I didn't go, but a couple of our city councilors and the city administrator did. And one of the things coming out of that is the sense that the state has so much revenue coming in from a really good economy in Oregon right now, and good income taxes for residents. And when we talked to this morning about transit in Clackamas County, it's at the local level. Different communities have their own systems, and if the funding was there at a local level for people to work on first and last mile micro transit, and developing their own transit systems and interconnecting those to other local systems, that would be a big help on that issue of transit and the lack of it in this tolling corridor area. So it comes back to will some of these freshman senators and representatives be open to a whole new model of funding virtually everything we do in the state, giving more state funds directly to cities, because cities know how to spend it. They know what works in their own communities, and beyond just the transportation level, trying to change the whole model of how we fund local government in Oregon. The governor wants to control too much of it. They put the demands on us and don't provide the funding. Let them provide the funding and set some goals and some directions. But it's not just revenue sharing on gas taxes. It should be some revenue sharing on income taxes as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Buck.
Thanks, Commissioner. I know we got to move on, but half the region's transportation plan, half of that, nearly, if not more, billions and billions and billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars, right, is all going to the transit system, which is a real challenge, for Clackamas, because so many of our residents feel like that's the system that just doesn't work for them here, right? So when we see so many resources region-wide, going to a system that so many people feel like really doesn't work in their neck of the woods, I think that's something that we have to kind of continue to stress as part of this conversation. And I also want to, in regards to the RMPP, okay, so now that the third lane has been rescinded, I'm imagining sort of, yeah, okay, set aside, whatever. Okay. We got the RMPP, I-5, I-205, and that and tolling in general accounts for half of the state's funding for transportation. So I mean, big emphasis, and we know that the state has told us, they are having a difficult time seeing a path forward for transportation funding without some form of tolls. It's half their revenue. Yeah, I wonder what projects, we've heard them consistently say tolls generated on these corridors are spent in these corridors. So half the transportation, yes, we've got a couple, if I-205, if that third lane is a project, and then the I-5 Rose Quarter, project. But aside from that, I'm just more of a question. What are the projects along these corridors? The only corridors that are, that I-5 and I-205 with half the state's funding. Are there other projects identified along those corridors that RMPP is going to fund, or how does it?
Maybe a couple of responses to that is, number one, there's the Nexus project list that every week had that enjoyable air quotes exercise of coming up with a list of projects that, would be impacted by or would have a nexus to the toll project, right? And Clackamas County as a group had over 150 projects that we felt would need to be updated or improved upon to do that. And we've been told very clearly by ODOT that tolling wouldn't be able to fund all those things, let alone the projects that they are mandated to try to resolve, which are those commitments in 2017 to resolve the bottlenecks of Rose Quarter and 205. And so, I'm sorry, that's why I did air quotes, probably a little out of my wheelhouse there to say like, oh, they rescinded I-205, but I think that's the one thing that we haven't mentioned that I think should be in your testimony. My recommendation to you that was a legislative promise and millions of dollars put into that. The whole reason why that project was proposed was to resolve a bottleneck to reduce congestion. And so if you're going to be told and there's no project to do that, it seems as though that's going to move y'all in opposite directions of the support. So it's interesting to me that ODOT can just, at a staff level, walk away from a commitment that elected official legislators made. And so I think that probably needs to be pressed on, and something that you as elected officials will be able to press on. I would not let that just go if I were you. And at the county level, we are not going to let that go. I mean, that's going to be a priority for us, I believe, until they show us modeling or data that says otherwise. And I've heard several of you say that doesn't exist yet. That's a big challenge. But to your point, Mayor Buck, about the projects that need to be around here to sort of supplement or support a toll program, I would say that that's a good segue into your next topic about the regional transportation plan and how they are trying to incorporate pricing and tolling into this policy body that frames up what the future of transportation looks like within our region. So I'm going to move them over as a segue here to maybe speak to some of those questions, because I think that that's probably a good opportunity for them. And so while they're moving over, we talked a little bit about the RTP this morning, and that's coming to a set of, a couple of tables for recommendations, and will ultimately go to Metro for approval. This has been 2 years in the making. There have been a lot of opportunities to sort of weigh in, definitely at the staff level, but C4 as a body weighed in, I believe it was August during a comment period, might have been September, losing track of my dates now. But I think maybe it was September. We all submitted a comment letter about a number of things. I believe Section 8 or Chapter 8 was one of them, and then wanting or requesting more details about how tolling and pricing would influence the regional transportation plan. So kind of a little bit more of an informational update, but Tom and Kim are here from Metro to share with you more about how that all works together, or is planned to be working together moving forward.
Good morning. Trent, I was going to ask if you could promote Catherine Charlo as well. And to introduce myself, Tom Kloster, Regional Planning Manager at Metro. And I'm also here to introduce Catherine, who is our Planning Development and Research Director and is about to arrive from cyberspace. And then Kim Ellis is also here. Kim is our Regional Transportation Plan Project Manager. And several folks here saw Kim early this morning in the pre-dawn hours talking about the regional transportation plan as well. There's Catherine.
Hi, thanks so much. I think I missed the introductions. I wanted to make sure that Kim got introduced. And then I'll quickly reintroduce myself. I think Tom said it. I am the Director of Planning, Development, and Research at Metro. And what we wanted to do today is just frame up a little bit of information that we're going to give you about how the tolling policies currently show up in the RTP, and then really spend our time with you guys answering questions you have, maybe walking through the staff recommendations about how that would change slightly with this version, and answering questions and concerns. And just taking a step back for a framing comment, it is clear there's unbelievable intensity of feeling around tolling in this region. In this room, I've been listening to your conversation and just really support your work to talk through this and figure out what your communities need and how to get what your communities need communicated very clearly to the legislature and to ODOT and to us at Metro. So thank you for that. I think that swept up in the intensity of feeling around tolling, the RTP has had kind of an unfortunate overlap of timing that has made it seem like there's something brand new in the RTP. And even Trent, the way you stated it, you said kind of how the RTP plans to put tolling, into the region. But in fact, pricing has been in the RTP since 2000. So it's not new. It sets out the interest as a region in looking at this as one strategy for funding and congestion management. It doesn't mandate it in any way. And what we're seeing now, due to the real increase in focus on it, is requests from all quarters, including you all and including our own Metro Council, to try to tighten up those policies a little bit to address some of the concerns we're hearing and make sure those policies are applied in a way that's really responsive to community needs. So again, just wanted to start off, I'm going to turn it over to Kim here. She's going to give you a quick history, but I just wanted to start it off by saying this RTP doesn't introduce tolling or pricing. And I know that has gotten lost in the conversation, and I completely understand why, because it's such a heightened conversation and a short timeline, and coming out of COVID when it's been really hard to get good information out about this. That said, I'm going to turn it over to Kim, and then I'll come back to just walk through the staff recommendations at the very end. So thanks for having us. We really appreciate it.
Great. And Trent, I'm not able to share screen at this moment.
Should be good now. Thanks for coming.
Okay, great. Thank you. It'll just take me a second here. Bear with me. So I just have 6 slides to go through relatively quickly here. I just want to highlight what Catherine just said, and that in fact pricing of throughways was first brought into the RTP in 2000, and that was after a multi-year study that was conducted by Metro, ODOT, and others in the region. And at that time, the policy was that where there are projects being considered to add new freeway lanes to the system, that those projects consider congestion pricing along with transportation system management and operations, increased transit, and better street connectivity as alternatives. It doesn't direct that congestion pricing be implemented, but that it be considered along with these other options as part of that. The study that was completed in the late 90s really looked at many different ways in which congestion pricing could be implemented. At that time, the policymakers, JPACT and the Metro Council, that were there at the time, really focused on where there's new capacity expansion of the throughway system, not pricing existing lanes. The RTP at that time also defined areas, particular corridors that are listed here on this slide, where congestion pricing or tolling should be considered as part of future corridor refinement plans. Again, not saying that it must be implemented, but that it should be considered as part of all of the different strategies and solutions that would be considered to address transportation needs in each of these corridors. Moving forward, so that was the policy that has been in place for the last 20 plus years. Moving forward to 2018, there was an amendment to the 2018 Regional Transportation Plan that was brought forward by ODOT to bring the preliminary engineering phase of the I-205 toll project into the Regional Transportation Plan for the first time. And this allowed the project to be able to advance forward into the NEPA work that is currently underway. That process was a multi-month, I think almost 6 or 8 month process of significant discussion around the C4 Metro table, the JPACT and MPACT tables, and the Metro Council. And as part of that action to amend the Regional Transportation Plan to just include the PE phase, I just want to be clear about that. There was also a set of commitments that were adopted as Exhibit B to the ordinance. So this slide highlights what those commitments were that basically were what JPACT and the Metro Council said at the time must be addressed for future phases of that project to come forward into the RTP and to be able to receive authorization for funding through the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. I won't read through them, but we can refer back to them if you are interested. But these are all of the things that you have been talking about already in your earlier discussion that have continued to be raised as we've been going through this RTP update, but also as the I-205 toll project has come forward to JPACT and the Metro Council since then. Immediately following that amendment, it was approved in April of 2022. There was a letter of agreement that was signed by the ODOT director, Chris Strickler, and Metro Council President Peterson. 2 days later, or within a few days after that RTP amendment was approved. And this highlights, the bullets on this slide highlight what at that time were laid out in that letter of agreement. There's a lot more detail under each one of these bullets, and we can make sure that that is available to you. But it really specifies and speaks to all of the things that you all continue to raise and weigh in on through that project. So these two commitments are the things that, as the RTP process has been going forward, we have built this into our staff recommendations that we want to ensure that as these projects go forward and future decisions by JPACT and the Metro Council, that those commitments are documented and that we're making sure that they're followed through on. So moving forward to the current draft regional transportation plan, we do have new policies that expand on what was adopted back in 2000. And all of these policies, and there's actions related to each one of them, really are trying to address and ensure that the local and regional concerns that have been raised about these projects are addressed and that they are reflected in policies, in the regional policies, so that as JPACT and the Metro Council consider future decisions around those projects or other congestion pricing or tolling projects in the future, that these policies are a lens through which to ensure that there's consistency with regional policies and actions. The last slide, or a couple slides that I wanted to highlight here is that so we went through a public review period of the pricing policies and other the full draft regional transportation plan. And we're now in the final decision phase for JPACT and the Metro Council next week. MPAC, the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, will be asked to make a recommendation to the Metro Council, but JPACT and the Metro Council will be taking their actions in November. And the Metro staff recommendations that have been forwarded to for consideration as the plan is finalized is to continue to ensure that those NEPA processes are addressing the local and regional concerns being raised, and that they follow through on the project partner commitments, and they are consistent with the policies in the regional transportation plan. And that those policies that I showed on the previous screen, that those policies and those commitments really are, there's findings that are documenting that those projects are consistent with both the commitments and the policy as part of future JPACT and Impact Council decisions. This is not a new requirement. This is normal for us as whenever there's a amendment proposed to the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, which basically provides money for projects to move forward to a next either planning phase or construction phase, that it's providing providing parameters upon which to demonstrate for ODOT to demonstrate how they're consistent with both the commitments and the policy. The specifics of the recommendations are here. I've just highlighted in orange some of the key things that are part of this. These Metro staff recommended actions are what have been brought forward to Metro's 2 technical committees, the Metro Technical Advisory Committee, which advises MPAC, and then the Transportation Policy Alternatives Committee, which advises JPACT and makes recommendations to JPACT. And so these are currently under discussion. In fact, we just came from the MTAC. They did make their recommendation. I didn't have enough time to reflect those changes, but essentially these are largely intact with some modifications to what you see here. But this is really continuing to try and elevate, your voice, with the voices that, as you've been raising these concerns, at the regional table, in the legislature, with the state with ODOT. So we're working to try and ensure that there's some accountability and continued transparency in how they're addressing all of the many things, the concerns that you see there on the left side of the screen. So I don't know, Catherine, if you would like to say any words, but this is what we wanted to share, and happy to answer questions about this or the RTP itself.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. I would like to just say one last thing, and I'm happy to walk through some of those key orange bulleted pieces, which I think I'd like to hit on just briefly in a second. But before then, I just want to, having just got off the phone with one of your colleagues who was talking about sort of a protest vote on the RTP, I just want to address that really directly, because the RTP it's a menu. It's not an investment plan. Even I think sometimes when we talk about it as Metro staff, we make the mistake of giving the impression that it is a list of things that are going to be built, but it's really not. It is a list of things that are in a list, so that if there's funding in the future that's located, and if there's political support, and if it's moved through a funding process, then it gets built. And the challenge, I think, with that has been that it hasn't been super clear that part of that, if for some of the big freeway projects, has been, if it gets funding, tolling may be a part of it. That is actually not something that is written into the RTP per se. What the RTP does is what Kim just described, is if a project is submitted that has tolling as part of its financing plan, it must meet the requirements that are in here. And that's what we tried to do with these staff recommendations, is make those requirements clearer and tighten them up. And that was really as a result of the concerns we were hearing about safety, the need to invest in safety, diversion, the need to really understand the diversion impacts of tolling, revenue sharing, making sure that if revenues are collected, even on the freeway system, that there's a way to ensure that they get distributed to projects off of the freeway system. And as Kim talked about, just the consideration of all these things through the NEPA process. So that's what those orange words do. They do not add anything new about pricing. What they really do is try to say, Let's make sure we do it in a transparent and regional community focused way. And so just to go back to the no vote on the RTP, the worry that I have is a no vote on the RTP is actually doesn't advance these things, nor necessarily does it stop the projects from moving through the RTP. What it does, unfortunately, is throw our federal funding into chaos. And so would just ask, that as you have questions, ask us directly, tell us what you need to help get comfortable with this concept, because I sense that a no vote on the RTP feels like an option, but may in fact create less local control, not more. So I'm going to stop there and just invite questions and comments.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Savas. You're on.
Commissioner, you're.
Yep, there we go. Catherine, thank you for soliciting our thoughts or questions on this. So on the colored lettering there, on the last slide, C and D use the word should. And in other areas, on some of the other ones like A and others, has the word must. And I'll just tell you that I can understand maybe, and I'm confused a little bit between what is Metro directed and what is JPAC directed, because the agreement between ODOT and Metro was not a JPAC item. It was a Metro to ODOT agreement. So under C and D, it says should, resolve diversion, whereas the previous slide talked about solving diversion. So I'm not comfortable with the word should under C and D. I would rather see it be must. Okay. And it's not consistent with the previous couple slides where it talked about diversion. So look at C, and it says ODOT should evaluate and address diversion. Well, that's not consistent with, again, the previous slide or two before this. And it doesn't represent, I think, what the local jurisdictions want, because we are the victims of it more so than Metro is, because we operate and own those systems. There are constituents in the sense that we answer to them directly. It's within our jurisdictional boundaries of transportation, and we deliver transportation services. And then D, again, TPAC and JPAC should identify what is reconciled and not reconciled with Nexus projects, because there's some interplay between or confusion as to what is mitigation and what is Nexus. And I'm concerned that what should be mitigation will be pushed off into Nexus for some future thing. And it, again, doesn't address some critical issues on the previous slide. Could you roll back to the previous slide from this one? Okay. Whoops, no, go back to the one you just had there. Okay. So that one says ensure NEPA processes address local and regional concerns related to tolling. So when it says local, that is West Linn, Clackamas County, Oregon City, Gladstone, right? Is that what local is in that definition?
Yes.
Okay. So scroll back one more. I think it was at the bottom corner, said it was 5 at the bottom. I had a number 5 at the very, very bottom. There we go. That one there. Well, yeah. So that is that. I can just see it at the corner. Okay. So go back one. I'm sorry. Centering on equity, minimizing, is that it there? Centering equity, for reinvesting, improving safety road. Go back one more. Okay, the agreement. So ODOT will submit integration, center equity, monitor diversion, future local. I lost it. I don't know which slide it was, but you had there was language in there that talked about addressing the diversion before the project started. Don't know where it was, but it was there. That's what I have.
Commissioner, maybe I could just give a real quick response there. The way that is drafted, they reflects actually those things coming from a couple of different places. At this point, what you're seeing are staff recommendations. Those will come to JPAC through TPAC. I don't know because I haven't seen the final, if the shoulds and musts will move around or stay. But that is something that you as a JPAC member, Commissioner Savas and others, can introduce and talk about what should be shoulds and what should be musts. And I know ODOT has opinions on that, and some of your fellow JPAC members will have opinions, but for the purposes of staff recommendation, the intention there was really to communicate a reinforcement of the commitment. Should and musts absolutely are something you all should talk about at JPAC.
I just wish there was ample time to talk about all the details of that several 100-page document which we can't. And I think that's the handicap, is that conversation is there's just not enough time to go over the details, and there hasn't been enough time to go over these details. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trent, did you have a comment?
Just an administrative apology. We were not able to confirm this presentation and update until basically just yesterday or the evening of the day before. And so very quick to add this to it. And so I'm looking at the materials here and see that they're different from what we've been providing at the C4 Metro Subcommittee. So I'm going to make a point to get this PowerPoint to y'all this week so that you have access to it. Apologies that it's not in the packet today, because I know it's hard to reference that stuff, but it was a really late confirmation that for their availability, just because of how the outreach was working out. So I just want to acknowledge it, say I'm sorry for it. We'll get something emailed to you soon.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Trent. Go ahead, Mayor.
Hey, thanks, and thanks for the presentation. I just had a couple of questions. One is just about diversion, which mentioned earlier. You probably heard me make a comment earlier about that, but I was just wondering, like, how, in your opinion, did we get to a place where, like, the diversion calculations in the NEPA process, for example, for West Lynn, we only got in the old EA a flashing light and for a crosswalk and a new sidewalk in an area that didn't even really need that. And how do we ensure that through this process that does not happen again in future environmental assessments or NEPA processes with, like, the diversion calculation and the modeling? Because everybody was so fired up about that when we saw the impact. So, like, how do we change the definition of what's an impact and what's significant? Is that through this process?
I'm going to give you a quick political answer, and then I'm going to switch to Kim for the technical answer, because you don't want me in the technical parts of this answer. But the quick political answer is that ODOT is the project owner, and ODOT is running the NEPA process. ODOT is the lead on the NEPA process. So I can't answer it from the point of view of how did we get there, because Metro did not do that analysis. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kim to talk a little bit about how this might address future analysis.
Yeah, so I think that these set of recommendations, along with the policies that are in the draft RTP that was released for public review, really define diversion as basically if tolling is implemented, diversion of traffic onto other facilities as a result of that tolling. That's what they're looking at. That is what the definition of diversion is. There's already diversion that happens in our region because of congested facilities. So I think, one reason may be because of how they did that analysis and how they were accounting for what was a direct effect or a direct impact from travel changing as a result of having to pay a toll. I do think that what has been long discussed since the I-205 toll project amendment was brought forward to the RTP is the importance of looking at the whole system and the impacts on the whole system, locally, in the adjacent area, but there are broader impacts to the system, and the recommendations in the RTP and the commitments that were adopted by JPACT and the Metro Council continue to link the importance of looking at the regional mobility pricing project and the I-205 toll project together. So I think that these policies help support a broader consideration of the potential diversion, not just in the immediate area, but on the broader system that would need to be considered in their analysis. And I would also just add that ODOT is the lead agency. They do the NEPA process with the U.S. Department of Transportation. So Federal Highways Administration is another place in which concerns should be raised to this process. I don't know how much that has happened. I should know that, but I don't know how much that has been raised with the Federal Highway Administration, because they are responsible for any approvals of those projects to move forward to advance to construction.
Thank you, Kim. Mayor, I hope that starts to get at your question. And
No,
what I hope it really gets at is that dynamic of the RTP isn't the place where the decisions about these projects live. It's just the place where the fact that the project can undergo this process lives. But what we're trying to do is build a little bit more accountability into those NEPA processes.
I appreciate that. No, I'm just, it does answer part. I just trying to figure out kind of like where this statement comes from ODOT, where they say, everybody agreed to the model that leads to this result. And then the result is like totally not what anybody thought. I would have thought we would have been getting, for example, the roundabout at Highway 43 in Willamette Falls Drive as a diversion project, but then it's not even listed as an impact. In fact, I think their data tried to show that it would get better with tolling. So just, that was one concern. The other question I had, and this is kind of more of a, maybe a little bit of a nuclear option type question, but what would happen if like something like the RMPP was removed from the RTP by JPACT or Metro, and then it was said pending further consultation with regional partners to get on the same page? Is that an option, or what would be the impact of that happening?
I'd like to defer that question to Tom, if either Tom or Kim.
Sure, that one's pretty straightforward. To receive federal funds, whether you're the state or a city or a county or metro, you need to be in the regional transportation plan. So that would be a nuclear option for sure. ODOT has its own funding that it could probably bring forward, but I think they're relying on federal funding significantly on these projects. So my guess is that it would be a big impact for them. I'll add one more thing there, Mayor. When we're talking about the regional transportation plan, it's one of two things that the region can use as influence on how ODOT does its work. To do a project in the region using federal funds, it needs to be in the regional transportation plan. There's also state planning requirements. So there's really a couple layers there that if you want to build a project, a transportation project of regional significance, it needs to be in that plan. That's the policy frame, and that's what we're about to take action on here soon at JPACT and the council. And then Kim mentioned the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, and that's analogous to a city's local CIP to your comp plan. So at the regional level, we have the MTIP, which is like a CIP in a sense. It's a shorter term funding document. That's the other decision point. So Kim had the one slide showing the different conditions that we're proposing ODOT meet before they proceed to receive additional funding on these projects to go forward in essence. So I just emphasize that because those are two really important handles to grab onto if you want to influence state projects at the regional level. And those are available to JPACT and the Metro Council as our Metropolitan Planning Organization.
So we do need to wrap up here, but Commissioner Savas and Mayor Buck, if you can keep it short.
Yeah, Mayor Beliostowski's twice mentioned the what Brendan Finn has stated, and that is we agreed on the regional model. And I hear our staff saying, no, we didn't. That's not true. So that's what it wasn't a diversion model. It was, we agreed on, and he tells the OTC, he tells the Joint Transportation Committee members, the subcommittee members, that it's a frequent statement that he's made, that we've agreed on the regional model when we have not. So I'm not sure what that means. But one thing, can you, Tom, you just mentioned in Metro staff, you presented the PPT, the PowerPoint. Could you send that to us ASAP? I really appreciate it. I mean, right now I'm at a disadvantage. It's not in a packet. I wish it didn't happen this way so that we can have it. But you know, I just feel a little bit of a disadvantage to have materials that I can't look at be just put on the screen and just disappear.
Counselor, if you wouldn't mind, is it all right if we have Kim speak to the model question for the commissioners, to the commissioners model question?
Yes, please keep it
Thank
short.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the regional model is the Metro travel demand model that we develop and use for regional transportation plan updates. And it is also what is being used for the analysis for the ODOT toll projects. So it is a state-of-the-art, federally approved model that we use, and it has the ability to do the kind of analysis that you all are asking for. How they do that analysis and what they share from that analysis, I think, is a different question. But the model is a very good model. It accounts for all of the different things that you have been asking for, and there is a lot of capability for it to be able to identify impacts to the system locally as well as system-wide as part of their analysis. So it's more about the scope of what they're using the model and how they're what they're reporting and how they're reporting it.
Yeah, in our response to ODOT's EA, our technical team consultants pointed out the issue with the model, and I'm not sure what details or how the intricacies of that was, but we pointed out that there's some flaws in that. I'm not sure it's Metro's model per se. It could be what factored into the model, but we did not agree to it. We pointed that out in the EA. So I just want to make that statement.
All right. Thank you to Metro staff for being here to present to us. We appreciate the updates and the information, and we will be following it closely. To stay on time, we have an end time at 1:30, so I want to move us on to the tolling survey discussion. Mayor Bialostowski, do you have some opening remarks on this topic?
Oh, sure. We talking about the survey or polling discussion? Okay. Well, sure. I've just been, I'll go back a little bit. So a few weeks ago, we got the survey from ODOT about the RMPP options and heard a lot from community members on our social media channel saying, hey, you know, I didn't feel like I could provide input into this that reflected my views on the topic, even though I was asked to provide my input on preferences and what I wanted. So I wrote the letter to ODOT saying, hey, there's some issues with this, and calling out some different concerns. And then after that, I started to think, you know, what's a logical next step that could help us all in our advocacy for different fronts with, you know, tolling, pushing back, making sure it's equitable, making sure it's fair, having the alternative funding conversation. So I kind of thought maybe getting some public opinion data from a poll of our region would be helpful. So I've been exploring that idea, and I'm planning to reach out to some different polling firms to get an estimate and kind of talk more about it. And some of the ideas that I thought could be things like, you know, what's your opinion of the current tolling plan, laying out what the state's working on, what the legislature directed to happen, how informed are people about things, what do people think of traffic, what are people's opinions about alternative funding mechanisms, such as adding, you know, if you add capacity and toll that added capacity as a managed lane, you know, would you and leave a choice for people on the roadway, would you support that, etc. So I'm planning to reach out in the coming days to some different companies, get an estimate, and was thinking of coming back to see to leaders at this table and saying, you know, if we can split the cost of something like that, you know, if it was 50,000, if a couple cities or a few cities wanted to split the cost, it could be easily attainable. So the question I really had for everybody here is, you know, what kind of information do you think would be helpful to have from our public opinion, you know, the average person out there, in a statistically valid way, with the intent really of being able to use it in the legislative session coming up at some point, you know, to be able to point out, hey, you know, senators and representatives, whatever percent of people don't support this current plan, 80%, 90%, whatever, but they would support X or Y, and they have these, they're concerned about this. So, you know, just being able to use that to influence the policymakers would be helpful. I'm not really talking about influencing ODOT per se, but it's really about turning towards the legislature and presenting them with the data of what our people are really thinking. So anyway, I'll stop there. Happy to answer any questions or take feedback. I'm, like I said, planning to meet with some or contact some polling firms like DHM, ask about it, get a quote, and come back and with some more formal ideas. And yeah.
Is there any feedback? And thank you.
Well, for one here, it'd be my hope that we can get some regional support for that. And what I mean by that is, you know, not just us in Clackamas County, but some other jurisdictions that would be interested in that. I think that would go a long way. There probably would be value in getting a rough estimate from consultants, whether it's DHM or others. So I support that endeavor. You know, with the regional support, and then we can discuss, you know, or strategize what it is we want to survey or ask.
Councillor Sherman.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, you know, as with any survey, the trick is to ask the right questions and to do so in a way that's not misleading or not leading, so that we're able to demonstrate that the data we're getting is good quality data. And I think, you know, my point being, like, if we just said, hey, do you like tolls? We'll get 99% no and one yes. And we'll be able to say, you see, nobody wants tolls. But if we're looking at somehow framing it and then communicating the trade-offs for things, you know, if tolling, you know, if you are going to be paying $3 in tolling in each direction, would that cause you to consider using public transportation or something like that, where the result may be that we find that people won't change their habits if we do something like this. So it's just a revenue generator and not going to impact congestion at all. And same kind of thing with as we look to diversion and mitigation, you know, getting a good feel for how much are how much you're willing to spend to make these things happen, or how do we structure it in such a way that we're getting good answers from people that, you know, that you want to have positive, proactive solutions that potentially come from the data, not just hate this, don't like this. So, but I'm, you know, while I can't speak for the city of Happy Valley, I mean, I think splitting the cost of this across multiple jurisdictions is certainly an attainable goal.
Councillor Pratt.
May I just respond?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I totally agree, Councillor Sherman, about being careful with the questions, and that's, I would be working with DHM and some professionals to make sure, because I criticize ODOT for having some bias in their survey. Definitely do not want to repeat that. Just looking to, I felt like everybody, there's so much concern about the topic, but then how do we quantify it in a way that, you know, and what people want, what people don't want, what people would support in different scenarios. So would work with DHM or whoever it is to make sure that it's done properly. I'm no expert in the area. I just had the idea.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Oh, Oh, I just wanted to say, I think it'd be great to, like, the whole idea of having a solution to have some kind of question that says if you don't, explaining that there's a funding shortage and asking what other options would be viable to people. Like, it's not like there's no cost to this if we don't have tolling. So just to see what other options or people would support. And that, I think that's really good information for everyone. And the other thing I just wanted to say, our council already wants to go forward with this, and we've left it with our city manager on the amount when you get that to approve that or not. So we're on board.
Hey, that's great. Thank you. Anything else?
Any other comments? I guess I would just say this is something that the mayor and I talked about separately, is something that I would like to see in a poll if we were to do something, is if people feel like their voices have been heard from ODOT, and if whether they have confidence in ODOT's ability to carry this out in a fair manner. So that's something that I think might be worthwhile for us to gauge. Is Mayor Bialostowski talked about being able to use this in front of a legislative subcommittee and point to the data. I think it would also be helpful for us to not only show the data on whether people approve of this plan, but whether people approve of the body that will be ultimately executing this project. Mayor Buck.
I'm wondering if, maybe we kind of take this idea to that legislative subcommittee that's going to be out in our neck of the woods, right? Doing this outreach with groups of, I don't know who is going to come to these meetings, right? But encouraging them to do something more scientific. And, as ODOT, I understand. I mean, it's a great idea. We want to gauge honestly, right? We know where the public stands on this topic, right? In general. And it's coming up with the questions is the tricky thing, right? Because it's complicated and we don't want to get into this. We don't want to pay for, no tolls, right? Without the nuance, but we have to pay for the transportation system, and right. And we got to be careful ourselves as leaders putting something forward that we can't really stand behind, right? So the questions are just really important, and it's complicated. It's a complicated issue. And we do these community surveys here in LO pretty much every year. And they're for benchmarking, so the questions are pretty, how do you feel about the library? How do you feel about the police? Stuff like that. But when we have more complicated questions, it's tricky. It's tricky because these people are taking the survey like, real quick on the phone and getting rando community member who may have never heard of any of this, right? Because that's going to be your scientific survey, and be like, and in 10 minutes to understand like Oregon's transportation funding could be a challenge, so it's a good idea to get the sentiment, but it could it could also present some challenges we should just be aware of if we go forward,
Thank you. And so what I'll do going forward is I'll have contact some different outlets that would be able to do a survey and kind of talk to them about that and share the different concerns. Questions definitely are key, and get a cost estimate and report back to everybody to move forward or not. But I agree, Mayor Buck, the questions are, how do you do it in a way that educates people and doesn't bias them and gets their honest feedback, but it's a question like, what the current plan proposes to toll I-5 and I-205, but not the other interstates. How do you react to that? Something like that, so anyway, thank you, everybody. I'm happy to keep you posted on what I find out. Just a good idea.
Yeah. So Mayor, on that point, thanks for your input. Thanks for your energy on this. And I really appreciate you're taking the lead on this. How often does the mayors or the metro mayors or the mayors meet? You guys are a good group. It seemed to be that would help fast track that discussion if there could be a regional conversation amongst the metro area mayors at the minimum. Do you guys meet monthly? That might be a great venue to broach this.
A good idea.
All right. Thank you for that discussion. Thank you, Mayor Bialostowski. And then to wrap up our meeting, I will hand it off to Trent to discuss the schedule moving forward.
Thanks. Thank you very much. And this has been a really good topic today. I've taken a lot of information down, especially around how to help y'all be effective or to be at least supportive during the upcoming opportunities to testify on some of these moments. And so I know that here at the county, we'll be putting together some probably talking points for our own commissioners. And because we have C4, we can probably do a little information sharing here based on what y'all talked about and shared about. So we can have a little bit of a C4 thread as well as some of these testimony opportunities get moving. So I wanted to say that as part of like some things to expect in the calendar coming up. The next thing I wanted to share, of course, is that, and some of y'all have heard this already, that Brian Hockaday is here in the meeting with us. He is going to be stepping in as our C4 administrator moving forward. I'll still be around, but he'll pick up most of the work. And so we've shared this with the other C4 tables so far, but still we have in this meeting folks who maybe haven't seen him yet. So do expect emails from him, do expect updates from him related to C4. And we'll do our best to keep things as consistent as possible. Just appreciate being here. C4 has been a thing for me for 8 years. And so that's been a really long time. And there's been some hard things and good things and fun things. And we've done a lot together. So it'll be, I think, hard for me personally to take the back seat for a little bit. But though I'm not far away. So I'm really excited to be sticking around. And I'm excited to have Brian on the team. And he's going to do great. That said, for calendaring though, I'm and looking at the time, it's going faster. So I do want to just acknowledge we had talked at the last meeting about whether this was still a good time to meet because the RTAC meeting is starting to move around. And there was a moment when we had thought this would be a good pre-RTAC meeting. And it can still potentially be that. But I think right now, I don't have enough information to recommend, whether y'all should or shouldn't move or even do a doodle poll about it. And I think that I would like to at least wait until we understand more fully what that the legislative subcommittee is going to be doing and what their calendar is. So once I have that information, I can match it with the RTAC meeting. And if it looks like we need to move this meeting, what I'll do is we'll send out an email to try to reschedule or doodle poll, and that would probably come from Brian. But that's, I think, my recommendation on how we should look at that moving forward. I also just want to add, I think December is a little weird. I think this meeting would happen very close to that holiday weekend. And so one more thing to be thinking about, and maybe we can address it in November if y'all want to bump it up a week or not. Sometimes maybe you don't need it, or maybe there's not a meeting that would be influential to do that early coordination on, or maybe you cancel it. So let's retain that until next month, but wanted to flag it. That's all I have.
Well, thank you, Trent. And as you know, discussing tolling is always a gift. So maybe it'll be perfect for the season to discuss that. Thank you, Trent. Thank you, Brian, for being here. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say, or did you want to introduce yourself real quick? I know you know many of us here.
Sure, happy to introduce myself. Thanks for the opportunity. Brian Hockaday again, really looking forward to jumping in and supporting C4. I've been working with Clackamas County, but embedded within the public health division. But truth be told, my background is more on the policy, transportation policy side. By no means am I an expert, but definitely look forward to supporting all of the great advocacy work that you all are doing. I know it's very complicated and that this process is frustrating and moving fast, but definitely think it's worth remembering that you all have been very effective and influential already. So I'm definitely looking forward to joining and supporting all of your work.
Thank you, Brian. We are looking forward to working with you to advance the goals of Clackamas County. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone.